Hello, my name is Caroline Collier and I'm an English as a foreign or second language teacher and course coordinator at Manchester Metropolitan University. I'd like to speak to you today about how you can support the English language development of those seeking sanctuary. This is known as Esol. So Esol is a term you might have heard of before. It stands for English to Speakers of Other Languages. So that's English to those who are generally living in an English-speaking environment and want to develop their English language skills. So why is this important for sanctuary seekers, refugees and asylum seekers? Esol is incredibly important for integration into the community and in both the social and economic, areas. If you imagine how it feels to not be able to speak the language, but then also be expected to be able to survive and then thrive in a community where you can't express yourself. Many people who are sanctuary seekers might be very skilled professionals and they're unable to work in their field of expertise because of the English language barrier. That word barrier is something that comes up a lot when we talk about Esol, because language stops and blocks people from achieving what they want to. That could just be simply ordering a cup of coffee at a cafe, or it could be working as a doctor, which they did in their own country. So whilst we know that English language is very important for successful communication and to avoid any issues, it can also mean that sanctuary seekers need to take a language test to demonstrate the level of English they have. So there's an enormous amount of pressure on sanctuary seekers to develop their English language, but not a vast amount of resource to be able to do that. So when we talk about Esol, people learning English or the beginning of their English language learning journey can be separated into levels. Now, it's fairly straightforward to see the levels as something from beginner, when you speak no English, to advanced, when you speak English as I am now. But there are obviously many stages in these levels, and often refugees are categorized into these stages based on tests, and they then perhaps will get access to classes which fits in these levels. There are then 5 Esol specific levels. So imagine if you live in another country, say France, and you learn English in France, then you might be a beginner, elementary, pre-intermediate, etc. But if you are somebody living in the UK and you are studying English, you're more likely to fit into one of the categories of entry 1, entry 2, entry 3, level 1, level 2. But this diagram here shows how those two map together. Okay. As you can see, there is not much Esol for advanced, or no Esol for advanced learners. So in an Esol class, perhaps in the activities that you might be considering participating in, you're unlikely to be delivering what you imagine a formal English language lesson to be. You're not likely to be studying in front of a room full of people, teaching English grammar, for example. You're more likely to be supporting more experienced Esol teachers and practicing the language that has been given and delivered by the Esol teachers. You'll always have a manager or a point of contact to support you. And we could consider it quite informal. To demonstrate this, rather than thinking of Esol classes that you might participate in being like this, in a very formal education setting, consider it more to look like this, where you're working closely with a few students who are to practice their skills. Now, it's also important to know that Esol is very flexible. You might not know what you're going to be teaching or that day. So you need to be aware that you're not going to have to stick to a strict structure of a lesson plan and to respond to the students' needs. The most important thing is to be friendly and approachable, and be a person that the student feels comfortable communicating in English with. Teaching Esol will help you develop lots of skills, including a few I've put here. You really develop your patience as you need to think carefully and give the student time to process new information. And also your creativity of how you can explain what different vocabulary means. And I certainly believe that it develops you become more empathetic to the needs of these students, because you understand how frustrating it must be to want to communicate but not have the skills to be able to do so. The final thing I would like to speak to you about is language grading, and I find this is very important when you're delivering Esol. You need to think about the choice of what language you use. Okay, so speaking slowly and simply, in simple sentences, not using complex vocabulary or colloquial, informal vocabulary, so no idioms or expressions that might be unusual. Considering your stress, tone of voice, word pronunciation, how you say the words. It's really important, because whilst not much, you might feel that the student might not understand very much, how you say it can be really helpful. Using what we call paralinguistic features, so use of gestures, facial expressions, tone, pitch, voice, and of course the use of pictures and any other resources that you have. And avoid, whilst I say simplify your sentences, please avoid using inaccurate sentences. Okay, there's more information on this slide. So whilst you might find it quite intimidating and daunting, the prospect of teaching English to somebody who has no English, you think, how will I communicate? The key is to be kind and compassionate, and careful when you speak, considering your own choice of language, and being a person that the student feels comfortable interacting with is key. Don't put too much pressure on yourself to think, I am teaching this. You are a means of the student being able to explore the language and feel comfortable with the language, and then hopefully be able to use the language in the society where they feel comfortable.